See You Now is a podcast highlighting the innovative and human-centered solutions that nurses are coming up with to solve for today's most challenging healthcare problems. Created in collaboration with Johnson & Johnson and the American Nurses Association, and hosted by nurse economist and health tech specialist, Shauna Butler.
Hey, podcast listeners. Welcome to See You Now. I'm Shauna Butler. So, who's ready for summer? Phew. It has been a busy few months exploring, celebrating, and innovating at scale. In May, we kicked off another season of See You Now, observing National Nurses Month, chiming in on the important conversations happening around the globe, and issuing a call to action for nurses around the world to join the Nurse Hack for Health. And good heavens, did they and their friends, family, and innovation accomplices across the planet show up for some world-class, knock your socks off health hacking to address medical deserts, vaccine education, health equity, and racial disparity.
If you can observe something and articulate a challenge or a problem that's really bugging you, you can help solve it.
The truth is that nurses understand inherently what needs to happen.
A hackathon is something that will change your life in ways that you couldn't ever imagine.
It's about the connections.
I mean, I can still close my eyes and feel that hackathon and hear it and picture it.
My experience goes back to the guy who taught me a lot about big data early on, and his name is Fred Trotter. He co-wrote a book called Hacking Healthcare. Mm-hmm. And that's when I first started thinking about the H word, hack in a good way. The mischievous part of it is that we're mischievous together for a purpose. So we're doing positive things in the hackathon world. But the hackathon experience showed us if you carefully define a problem, know the guardrails around it, if you can ask the right questions, you can respond to it. And that's what we saw year after year, just at the Health 2.0 hackathons. And then we started to see them really grow in health.
Years ago, I was a struggling nurse entrepreneur, and a friend of mine said, Rebecca, you should attend a hackathon. And I didn't know what a hackathon was. And I showed up at this medical hackathon, and in the room was all the decision makers, the chief execs of the hospital, the physicians. And as I walked around the room, I realized there was no nurses there. And I thought for a moment, oh, this is where the decisions are made. I'm not supposed to be here as a nurse. But nobody asked me to leave, so I stayed for the weekend. And in the course of that one weekend, I learned more about the business of healthcare than I had learned an entire year of trying to start a healthcare business. I left there wanting to study the environment of medical hackathons. And as I did, there were a whole bunch of ones that had gone on. And what they told me is that very few nurses attended, but that a large portion of nurses were on the winning teams. So I thought, nurses must have the practical knowledge by which to create really great healthcare solutions. And that's where the idea came to me that there had to be a nurse hackathon.
We also checked in with the 3-year Global Nursing Now campaign as it reflected on its mission and recounted the surprising yet somewhat appropriate curves the coronavirus pandemic threw its way, and shared its transition to the Nursing Now Challenge, which will carry forward the ambitious mandate of the Nightingale Challenge to work with health employers around the world to create leadership development opportunities for 100,000 nurses and midwives in more than 150 countries by the end of 2022.
The thing is about Nursing Now is it's not one story. It's many, many stories from around the world. And the groups, we ended up with over 700 Nursing Now groups around the world. And all of the groups have a story to tell about things they've done. They've done amazing things, especially considering there's been a pandemic. And some of them have focused their work on the pandemic and what they've had to do to respond. I'm thinking particularly of Spain, which has been really hard hit, and the USA as well. I think the USA has had nurses flying around the country to hard hit areas, If that's not responsive, I don't know what is. I mean, it's been extraordinary. So everywhere has got stories to tell. That's what we have to remember about a global campaign is it has to be contextualized wherever you are And you can have global goals, which we did have, and I think people really stepped up to those. Where the biggest change has been in young nurses, and that's partly the pandemic, but it's also that young people think differently about everything, about life, about work-life balance, about connectedness. And what we found is that nurses really have benefited from being connected to each other globally. And so in some ways, the pandemic has facilitated that because everything we've done has been virtual. So we've been more global, really, than we would have been without the pandemic, I think, because every single event has been a global event. And that's been wonderful. What we've learned is everybody has something to teach and everybody has something to learn. And that is a huge lesson. And that is the lesson I really want to take forward, me personally, from this campaign, is we need to look at how we remain connected and how we continue to share.
During the season, we took a close look at how nurses are innovating in the face of truly gargantuan health challenges. Challenges such as our staggering mental health crisis and the difficulties of accessing care, the Black maternal health crisis in the U.S., the growing needs of the fastest growing demographic, older adults around the planet, and the planet and its health.
I'm a director of planetary health. So if I were able to wave a magic wand and climate change disappeared tomorrow, it is only one of multi-system collapses that are happening right now. So our forests are being cleared. We're losing biodiversity. We're having an extinction rate that's 1,000 times normal of the species on this planet. The oceans are acidifying. Land is becoming desert. We have soil, air, water pollution. We have changes in rivers drying up, extreme weather events. So the climate is part of the problem. It's a symptom of the problem, and it's much, much bigger than that. And then you asked about the health impacts of all of this. I think sometimes people think, oh, we'll start seeing problems around 2100 or maybe 2050. We are seeing changes now. We're seeing increased impacts on cardiovascular diseases. People who are living with respiratory diseases are certainly feeling the impact. So people with asthma or COPD are feeling the impact of a changing climate. Infectious zoonotic diseases, well, nobody has to ask us if those are real anymore. With the COVID pandemic, it is here. Antimicrobial resistance, heat strokes, malnutrition, civil unrest and trauma and strife, and mental health impacts of seeing a place that we love, a land that we could bank on supporting crops, become disrupted to the point where our livelihoods are gone and a place that we love has been destroyed. So it is happening now. These impacts are happening now. And if anybody doesn't believe me, ask your young people in your family or in your neighborhood or at your university. What do you feel about climate change? And many, many will talk about their despair and their lack of hope for the future. I do want to mention the 2019 Lancet Countdown Executive Summary, which basically says the life of every child born today will be profoundly affected by climate change, with populations around the world increasingly facing extremes of weather, food, and water insecurity, changing patterns of infectious disease, and a less certain future. Without accelerated intervention, this new era will come to define the health of people at every stage of their lives. That should wake nurses up.
We introduced a special series, Meeting of Minds, where we invite nurse executives to share their unscripted conversations with another thought leader about how they're partnering to address some of the thorniest problems that they're experiencing, and how together they're pushing the innovation agenda forward, and how they're creating environments where nurses are key players and leaders in doing so.
this kind of next generation of robots that we're able to bring to hospitals now is able to be much more adaptable. And I think it's just so much more well suited to that iterative, changing environment.
I think that's where the partnership is required, from the people who know what the clinical issues are to the people with the knowledge of how to make processes and AI and drones and robots work is so important.
We started to realize that it was really important not just to interact with our client sites, but to really bring that expertise in-house. We've had nurses on our advisory board. We have had nurses join us as consultants. And at one point, we even had a nurse as a full-time employee as we were getting installed with our first major flagship customer. So we're at the stage of the technology that it's a blank page that we can write. And I think that's a really exciting place to be.
As the warmth of the summer sun, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, shines hotter, our days stretch longer, and COVID vaccination rates increase, it's becoming safer to gather in person, attend concerts and sing at the top of our lungs, cheer on our favorite teams and athletes, and indulge in the summer season rituals of fun, travel, and exploration. Summer also means we're venturing into hurricane season, one that is already projected by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to be another very active season. We're seeing record-breaking high temperatures in the Northwest and a growing risk of wildfires. And as we've learned from Nurse Tanner Venema in our earlier episode, Disaster Ready, disasters aren't seasonally dependent. Disasters happen anywhere at any time with little warning, which is why disaster preparedness is key to survival and recovery.
Many years ago, I was working as a triage nurse in the emergency department at Straw Memorial Hospital, which is up in Rochester, New York. And I went to my mailbox, and there was a book that was sent to me from what was then at the time the Institute of Medicine. And it was on chemical and biological warfare. I have absolutely no idea why I, as a nurse, registered nurse at that point, received the book, but I took it home and I read it cover to cover. And throughout the book, it mentioned, the impact these events would have on emergency departments and on the healthcare workforce. And I talked to my physician colleagues and my nursing colleagues, and nobody really had any idea of what we would have to do should any of these events occur. And so I really kind of just started reading voraciously myself, and was a bit of an autodidact and just sort of taught myself a lot about disaster preparedness, public health emergency management, the incident command system, the concepts of the disaster life cycle, and what type of burden it has on healthcare systems. And I don't know, the work just kind of spiraled from there. And then 9/11 hit. And at that point, I was already a professor at the university, was teaching and doing research, and was shocked and devastated as everyone else was. And I remember watching the planes, go into the World Trade Center and canceling class and going back into my office, and that just spent the rest of the day drafting an outline for a book on the topic and emailed it to 3 publishers. And when I came in the next morning, 2 of them had already responded with an offer to work with me to publish a book on disaster nursing and chemical and biological and radiological terrorism. And so it just kind of took off from there.
That just sounds so ominous, but you're probably a really good person to help us understand disasters.
It's becoming pretty clear that they're not as rare and infrequent as I think most humans would like to believe they are. I mean, part of functioning on a day-to-day basis and being positive and happy and going to work and living our daily lives is in part our ability to deny that some of these catastrophic risks exist and that they have the potential to create such chaos and disharmony and even bad health outcomes for populations. So my whole career, I have worked to try to better understand these events in terms of metrics. The science regarding climate change is certainly unequivocal, and we are seeing more and more evidence on a yearly basis of the impact of greenhouse gases and rising sea levels and rising sea temperatures and what that's doing in terms of the increase in some of these devastating natural disasters. And then at the end of the day, humans are not always as genuine and altruistic as we would hope there would be. And so humans make mistakes. They may have some malintentions. We're witnessing increasing social unrest and violence within the United States itself, in addition to the nuclear dangers of growing arms race again across the world. So the reality is there are a lot of things out there that are hazards, meaning they have the potential to create an event that will have negative health outcomes for communities and the people who live in them. And yet at the same time, the good news is that we are incredibly resilient and very resourceful, and we have brilliant scientists and people working within public health and within the other related arenas to help protect human health. And that's become part of our national security. Yes, there are some days where I find my work overwhelming and onerous, and you're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to make it through this day? But for the most part, I'm actually a huge optimist, and I'm challenged to find solutions to help improve the way we do things. And of course, to constantly take the lessons we've learned from all the events that we've been through, whether it was Katrina or Superstorm Sandy or the California wildfires or what happened with the polar vortex in Texas, all within the context of a global pandemic, and say, what lessons are we learning? What do we need to fix? And what can we do better next time around?
Speaking of and thinking about preparedness and disasters prompted us to create our summer listening list. And reflecting on what we've experienced and preparing for what's ahead, there are a few episodes that stand out and can be really helpful to revisit. Thinking about the science, questions, and the current conversations around the COVID vaccines, listen back to our episode, Vaccines Work, Building Confidence.
There's so much information about what these vaccines are, how they were developed, how they were evaluated, how the review processes went, and how the emergency use authorization went. And I think especially because nurses play so many roles in this play, it really is important for nurses to try to understand all those things.
Ernest Grant agrees.
The one thing that will help to persuade the ones who are on the fence and the ones who are saying no, I think it's very, very important that they understand how these mRNA or messenger RNA vaccines work as compared to what we normally think of when we think of a traditional vaccine.
And that's where Nurse Lori Boyle's work comes in handy.
I belong to an organization called Nurses Who Vaccinate. It's a wonderful organization founded by Melody Butler. She was dismayed about misinformation out there. And so our goal is to help correct misinformation and also to give other healthcare providers the tools that they need to help do the same thing, because a lot of times healthcare providers are surprised by what incorrect information is out there, and so they don't know how to respond to it. And then in turn, the people who have that incorrect perception take that as a, well, the doctor doesn't know kind of situation. So we're trying to arm other healthcare providers with the tools they need in order to compassionately and accurately refute incorrect information that's out there.
Contemplating the need to focus on the other pandemic, the mental health crisis? Check out our episode, Charting a New Path for Mental Wellness, with nurses Preetma Dhillon-Chadha and Bridget Gannon, the co-founders of Lavender.
We were constantly being contacted by our friends and our families and our colleagues for mental health referrals. And everybody in my network was at full capacity. They weren't taking any more clients or patients. And the narrative that I kept hearing from my friends and colleagues were that they were having a lot of difficulty kind of navigating this mental health system. So they did not know how to find a therapist online. They didn't know the difference between a psych NP and a therapist. They couldn't find a provider that took insurance. Nobody was answering their phones. Nobody was returning emails. There was not pricing transparency for private pay services. So they were already feeling so low and depressed and anxious and being re-traumatized in the process of seeking care and trying to access care. Preetma and I felt there was a real time-sensitive need for an online psychiatry and therapy office that was super responsive and kind at every moment of the client journey.
So whatever comes your way this summer, whether you're in a car, on a boat, in a plane, on a train, or just hanging out, See You Now has you covered with great listening, learning, and inspiration to enjoy and share with your friends and family. You can find a link to a complete shareable playlist in our show notes. We have so much coming up in our next season that launches in October. And throughout the summer, we have some hot features coming your way. 2 profiles of nurse inventors who are making waves. Also, we're thrilled that See You Now had 3 episodes named as finalists in 3 categories for the ShareCare Awards. The 2021 ShareCare Awards recognize best-in-class productions and programs that promote well-being and embody the spirit of sharing care. The ShareCare Awards are held annually in association with the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, which is renowned for the annual Emmy Awards. This year's winners will be announced as part of their special virtual celebration this fall. More details on that will also be in our show notes. Finally, we want to hear from you. What problems are you seeing and solving? What discoveries are you making? Email us at hello@seeyounowpodcast.com. And if you're a See You Now fan, a great way to express your enjoyment is to take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. And most importantly, share it with others. Good health is a team sport, and the more fans we have, the healthier we'll all be. Until soon, I'm Shauna Butler. Thanks for listening.
Johnson & Johnson is proud to power up nurse-led innovation that is transforming health outcomes through skill building, leadership development, and more. The American Nurses Association ignites and celebrates nurse-led innovation to redefine quality nursing and advance healthcare for all. Learn more at seeyounowpodcast.com.